Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Enterprise Hub event. Hello, it's nice to see every friendly face this evening. Very hot faces, I think. I'm very hot today. But thank you very much for coming inside and enjoying another fantastic Writer's Block event. Tonight we are looking at the Enterprise Hub, and we do have somebody I think they've unmuted and I can hear myself back there, so I'm just going to mute you up. Sorry about that. So this is for Enterprise Hub and is with Manon, who is our resident writer with the Writer's Block at the moment. If you don't know anything about Enterprise Hub and you're thinking, what the heck is that? Why should I be interested? It is a fantastic programme which provides 12 hours of free business support to Liverpool City residents. Writing on the Wall is the only creative partner under the Enterprise Hub umbrella. And what we can offer you is an initial consultation about your business idea, your freelance plan, or an existing business. And then we can connect you on to the main hub where they will give you a business advisor. It's an absolutely fantastic opportunity, and we'll be talking about that more in the event. I'm going to be joined by Manon, who some of you, I'm sure, have already met, as she's been with us for 2 weeks on the residency already. But before I do that, and before I introduce you, Manon, and bring us on for a fab conversation, just a few of the house rules and how to engage with us today. So like I said, thank you so much for joining us in the Zoom room if you're here, or if you're live at home watching on YouTube. One of the fantastic things is once me and Manon have had a chat, you will be able to ask any of your own questions, and you can do that in 2 ways. You can pop in the chat box, you can type in your question and send it to Lauren, our moderator, and that's just listed as WowMod. So send your questions to Lauren and she'll pass them on to me, and I'll be able to bring them up with Manon. Or if you're feeling brave and hot, do put your hands up and we can unmute you and you can come on and ask Manon your questions directly. In terms of, the room, this just to uphold the usual values of WOW, please respect everybody in the room, everyone's experience, and I'm sure we'll have a fantastic time. And the other thing is to just introduce you very briefly to our wonderful WOW staff that are with us today. Nadia, give everybody a wave. Georgia is on the tech, and the wonderful Lauren as well. So if you need anything, any tech support, please message them directly and they'll be able to help you. So I get to introduce you, Manon. I'm sure, as I said before, lots of people have already interacted with you in the last 2 weeks, but for anybody who is new, Manon Steffan Ross is a novelist, a scriptwriter, and a columnist. I think you're many more things than that as well. And she works primarily through the medium of Welsh. Her works have been translated to English, Catalan, Arabic, Polish, Spanish, and French. And you do your own English translations yourself, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've won numerous prizes here. Your novel, Lasso, won the Fiction Prize at 2013, Welsh Book of the Year, and you've also numerously won the Ter Nog Prize 5 times for your children's fiction, which is incredible. So welcome, Manon.
Thank you for having me.
So today we've kind of posed a big question with this event, and that is, how do we finish what we have started and get closer to sharing our work? And I think I want to come to that question and wind our way there, really, because I feel like that's a huge question. And I thought we could sort of start at the beginning of your journey as a writer, as somebody who's making a living from their writing, and just ask you, to kind of demystify some of the kind of the writer with the capital letters, because I think the way in can seem quite daunting and confusing and lots of other things. So I'd just like to ask, how did it start for you? When did you start writing?
Oh, you're so right. It is so daunting, and I still find it daunting sometimes, particularly, I've been a writer for, I think, about 15 years now. And I still have that reaction. If anyone asks me what I do, I have that moment of, oh God, I'm going to have to tell them. Because it sounds like when your reply to that question is, I'm a writer, it sounds a bit like, oh, I'm a rock star, or, I'm a cosmonaut. It sounds like job a child would say that they want to do, but it's not a real thing that people do.
Yeah. Ooh, I think we've
but it was through the Eisteddfod. Or have you lost me?
Oh, you're back. I think we've got your voice. There you are. You're back.
Am I here? Do you know? Okay, I think there's a storm brewing, so I think the lightning might be closing in on us, and that's the problem there. So if I disappear,
we'll do our best. And in some ways, I'm glad the storm's coming because it will break just a little bit of this heat. I'm not complaining. I know it's lovely to have the sunshine, but
it's my one phobia is thunder and lightning. So if there is a storm, I will cry or disappear.
We'll look after you.
Yeah. So I started through the Eisteddfod, which is a big competition. Basically, it's a big festival in Wales. We have lots of tiny little Eisteddfods. Each area of Wales has its own Eisteddfod, but it's a chance to compete. You can sing, or you can write poetry, or prose, or whatever. But with the writing competitions, it's all done under a pseudonym, so you can get reaction to your work without risking that cringe gland that we have, that you don't want to show your work because you think, oh, maybe it's rubbish, or maybe they'll say they like it because it's me. You just get an honest opinion about what you're doing. So I started there. I was an actor before I was a writer. So I started with writing plays, but very quickly got into writing books, basically because my initial experiences of writing plays I found quite difficult because I had to relinquish control, and because I was so young and I was so new to it, I was so flattered that anyone wanted to put on a play that I'd written that I just allowed them to change whatever they wanted to, and then I had that horrible feeling of being in a theatre watching my own play and not wanting the lights to come up at the end of the play because I didn't want people to have to say it was good because I knew it wasn't good, and that scared me for 10 years. I didn't write another play for 10 years, but yeah, that's how I started, was basically Eisteddfod, but the equivalent, I guess, is competition in England.
So in terms of like because when I'm thinking of kind of demystifying that process, what were some of the practical steps that you took to kind of to start writing, to start getting your work out there? Was there kind of a light bulb moment, or was it just hard graft over a long time?
I think the light bulb moment for me was to separate myself from my work. And I think that's really, really important. I think that in situations like this, I'm here talking to you now, and we could be doing this on a stage and I wouldn't be nervous at all. But actually, I'm a really shy person. But I've almost sort of created this other version of myself that can do all this kind of stuff and that can be an author and be a writer and not worry about it. If I was in an audience looking at this happening, I would feel really shy and uncomfortable and anxious. But it's not so bad when you actually have to do it yourself, just because from the very beginning, I think you have to take your work seriously and not take yourself too seriously. So if we were talking about something other than work, I would be far more nervous, but I think you have to create that barrier. Otherwise, as well, you are going to get reviews that aren't so great, and you are going to get people saying, this latest thing you've done isn't as good as the other things you've done. It's going to happen. And so if you create that sort of barrier, it helps. It doesn't stop the sting, but it really helps you to be able to assess your own work more objectively as well, I think.
I really like that as well, and I think that ties into a lot of some of the discussions that I have on some of the courses that we run at WOW, and particularly around writing development for emerging writers, and the confidence that kind of comes with doing that and seeing yourself as a writer and taking your work seriously. because it's that belief in yourself, isn't it? Because like you said, looping back to what you said before, when you first started out, you were nervous because other people were telling you what to do, and it changed it so much that you couldn't be like, this is mine, and you know, I believe in it, and that's I take this work seriously. That's really interesting for people emerging, you know, to say, take your work seriously and believe in yourself first.
Anything creative, I think we as a society, we've created a sort of mystique around it, so that you think that there's a kind of mystery of it, there's a secret to it, or that you have to have something special about your character, or that it's got to hurt, and it doesn't have to hurt. You know, you don't have to put pressure on yourself. If you write a novel, it doesn't have to be the big novel. It doesn't have to have massive themes. It doesn't have to change the world, because it's not going to change the world, but it might change someone's world in their mind for the time that they read that book. But it doesn't have to be a massive big deal. The advice on how to write a book is to write the book. That's as simple as it is. It's just that we put barriers in front of ourselves. And, you know, you always get on people's bucket lists, what do you want to do, things that you want to do before you die. I'd like to write a novel. And that kind of creates, that's a really big undertaking. It's a massive sort of step to take, and it's going to take you a long time. And actually, it can be a really pleasurable, leisurely kind of activity once you get into it. And once you find that path, which can take time to find, I'm not saying, but once you're there, it can just come out so easily. And, you know, it can be a real thrill just to write it out. It doesn't have to be a huge undertaking.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that we might, as a writer, we might be putting barriers in ourselves, because a lot of writers that I work with, and as we know in the industry, already face barriers to writing. That could be for various different reasons, to do with the social economical background. It could do with if you've got a family that you are responsible for. It can do with your age, your race, your gender. It can be any barriers that are already there, and then the barriers that you put on yourself or that have been taught to you when you're younger. The thing I hear the most is often stories of, well, at school I was told I wasn't very good at this, or that I didn't have anything to say. And like just breaking that down often in that first one and saying, well, you absolutely do. You are a unique person who has a lot to say. And if you have a drive to write, you have the right to write. So do it and take that barrier away, because you might face many others. And that's definitely the one that you can solve yourself.
Yeah, do you know, I have to sort of check my own privilege here as well. I think because I write through the medium of Welsh primarily, that comes with a lot of privilege. And of course, you know, there isn't the same kind of readership. But I think if I hadn't written in Welsh first, I wonder whether I would have been published in these other languages. It's been a really positive thing for me that I'm writing in what's a minority language. I've really felt that privilege of being first language Welsh. But on the other hand, one of the big practical drivers behind me doing this as a job was necessity. So I think about 10 years ago, I was single with 2 young kids. I'd gone straight from school into an acting job. It wasn't practical for me to go back to acting because my kids are too young, and I'd moved into a more rural area where there weren't really any acting jobs. And I thought, I'm actually not qualified to do anything. I have no qualifications. I haven't been to university. I haven't got anything further than pretty dismal A-level results. So either I'm going to have a go at doing this thing that I really want to be doing, or I'm going to do something else and I'll never know. And that's the binary decision with doing something creative. You either do it or you don't do it. So every time you doubt yourself and every time you think, oh no, I can't do that, I can't push myself, it's just too embarrassing, I'll do it. You're either going to try or you're not going to try. Now, which of those do you pick? And once you see it in that sort of light, you think, well, actually, I'm not going to go to my grave thinking, oh, I wish I would have done that, because it can work.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else thought that then, because that's just made me just want to go off and write. You either do it or you don't. You decide.
It's actually that simple.
It can be that simple. Brilliant. So you're a prolific writer, Manon. You write a lot across a lot of genres as well. So, you know, children's fiction, adult fiction, writing for games, translating, of course, is its own area of writing. So what motivated you to pursue that many areas, and was it kind of a natural progression, or what?
Well, it was a natural progression from writing plays to writing books somehow. I think once I wrote a couple of plays and they were sort of staged, people's mindset changed about me. They thought, oh, I didn't realise that she wrote. And then I felt that I had a little bit more of a license to think, oh, I could write maybe something else. And but the other things, I think, I do a lot. About half of my time is taken up with writing for TV now. And I think that started off as something I thought, oh, that's a really good way of making money. But it turned into something that I just absolutely love doing. I love writing for telly now. And the fact that I'm allowed to do all these different bits of work, I think once you sort of establish yourself as a writer, you get offered different kinds of jobs. So last week I was offered to do some workshops for children, the teenagers, and the person who offered this job to me had no idea if I had any sort of experience workshopping writing with children, but because I'm a children's writer, I think, well, she does. And then once you do that, that's another string added to your bow, and then you do have the experience of it, and then someone else will ask you to do something else, and your experience just grows and grows and grows and grows. And the thing is, there's no 2 days are the same for me when I'm working, and that is, I'm so lucky, because I'm constantly sort of reminding myself that every day I get up and I want to work, I want to do my work, even if it's something that that's not sort of based on one of my original ideas. At the moment, I'm working on translating some cartoons from English to Welsh. So you have to go through the script, and then you have to match up the syllables from the English to the Welsh and all this sort of stuff. And I just love it. I just love it. And how many people can get up in the morning and say, actually, I want to do my work today.
Yeah. That's incredible. So the stepping stones for that is just get writing, start something, and then grasp the opportunities as they come. And
never think, don't let yourself automatically think that you can't do it, because sometimes a job will come in and I'll think, I'm really not sure I'm qualified to do this, am I? And usually I accept it anyway, and you do it because you've accepted the job, you take it seriously, and it all feeds into the next thing. So novels are my first love. When I'm writing a novel, when I'm in the middle of writing a novel, that's my happy place, and I will get completely obsessed with it, and it will just take over my mind for that amount of time that I'm working on that novel. But all the other bits I'm doing feeds into that. And in fact, not just with work, everything that happens in life kind of feeds into anything creative, I think.
Yeah, I've about 1,000 questions now about writing for TV, writing for games, but maybe we can come back to that a little bit later. And then if anybody's watching now who has a specific question about those areas, please do bring them in later for us. So our big question that we wanted to look at was, you kind of posed a point that it's often quite easy to get your ideas. It's quite easy to have lots of scraps and scribble things down, and you lose your confidence. We were talking about the barriers that we put in place ourselves, and we lose interest and we don't get it finished. So I actually think this sort of links into what you were saying before about having two people inside you, basically one who's writing and one who's kind of doing this professional, one who's kind of maybe a bit of a doubting voice, and one who's feels very comfortable to have an interview and talk about your practice and not feel nervous about it. And there's that kind of duality. What I found really interesting is I think that when I read an excerpt of your book, The Blue Book of Nebo, I thought that was really interesting because that links to almost the two characters that you've got in Dylan and Marina, because Dylan is, it's a fantastic book. So please, we'll talk about when you're going to be able to read that later on. But when Dylan's doing his expressing, he's creative expressing, he's not worrying about how it sounds. He's just doing it. And that's almost like your initial kind of writing something down. That's your first idea. And then Marina comes in and straight away, I think Dylan makes it says when he's talking about opening the book the first time as he's about to write in it, he says the pages were blank and wide like a new day. And that's like so much hope and like excitement. And like, that's what I assume you get as when you're writing your first ideas. And then Marina has got the doubting voice, and she writes immediately, I tried writing things down before, but nothing ever works. It never feels like the truth when I read it back to myself. It feels like it's happened to somebody else. And that's almost those two voices that you have to battle with, isn't it, when you're writing?
I've never thought about it before, but yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So really, like, let's have a little look at that. How do we stop that voice? How do we get those scraps of paper into something that then will be closer to being shared with others and building our portfolio?
Okay, I think to begin with, I have to admit that I do have absolutely loads of sort of scraps of paper, first chapters. I have half a novel. I've got about 50,000 words of a novel that I just kind of somehow just lost interest in, and I have no idea if it's any good or not. But the trick is to recognise when if you've stopped writing because you're not feeling it and it's just not the right idea for you to be pursuing at that point, or are you stopping it because you're scared, or are you stopping it because you've come up against a wall and you don't know how to get over that wall or to bash that wall down, but actually that is the idea. And this business of writer's block, I think a lot of these little scribbled down ideas that we have and these sort of first chapters that we have, we've stopped because we think, okay, I've got this writer's block, I don't know how to go on with this and I don't know where to go with it. And the financial aspect, because that's my job, is to be a writer. I can't afford to have writer's block, so I have to find a way to do it. And usually, because I have, a publisher that I tend to publish with, usually they're expecting a novel. I've told them I'm writing about this, and they'll say, okay, this needs to be in for me, and I will sort of get writer's block, and I just think, oh God, I can't put it off for months. I just can't do it. And I always find that the useful thing with when you come to that wall or that writer's block is just to take a couple of steps back in your writing. So maybe go back to the beginning of a couple of 100 words maybe, or maybe a little bit more than that, and try to find a different path into what you're trying to write. Because sometimes maybe I'll start another part of a novel and it'll be from, say, the perspective of the mother, and she's thinking about, and then I come to this space and I can't go on, and I think I always think if it's boring for me to write, it will be boring for them to read. So if I'm ever bored, it's a bad sign. I have to go back and rewrite that bit. But if you go back and just try it from a different perspective, so instead of writing from the mother's perspective, maybe you need to write about from the sister's perspective, and then you'll think, yeah, that's the bit. So go back and just try different ways into it. And maybe if you can afford to, just leave it for a couple of days. But if it's still in your head and you still think there's something there, if the story is still there in your mind for you to write, that's what you should be working on. And you shouldn't allow yourself, you're not doing yourselves any favour by leaving it and sort of, exactly as I've done with that 50,000 word novel. Don't let yourself do what I have done, because I've left that for 5 years and I'll never go back to it, because that's not where my head is. But that's the kind of novel that maybe would sell a little bit better.
Well, maybe there's a never say never moment there. Maybe in a couple of years you'll find it sparked your interest again. So I think that's really, really important. And I also think for me, working with a lot of emerging writers, and I myself have been on a creative writing course at university, and then experiencing that, and then experiencing the courses that we put on at WOW, and the kind of core values around putting that on at WOW, is a really interesting kind of juxtaposition there, because I do think often getting it from a scrap, an idea, to something that you can use and start to put in your portfolio and send around, you need people around you that you can trust, that can help you to do that. You don't, that we were talking before about this mystifying, like, the writer with the capital letter, and often we see that person as a very isolated person. And I know there are aspects of writing which you're just on your own and you've got to get it done, but there's actually a community that you can build around yourself to help you with those things. So it's
really important that you have connections with other writers, or maybe other people who create. So other people who have a creative outlet. I find sort of musicians in quite a similar position in a lot of ways to writers. But yeah, having that connection is really important. And I've found, I don't know if it's not an exclusively Welsh thing, I don't think, but I found that the community of writers, particularly female writers, I found to be so supportive and friendly. I remember right at the beginning when I was starting to write, this author, she's called Bethan Gwanas. She writes in Welsh and she's a fantastic author, really popular. And she would send me links to writing jobs that she was also trying for. And I thought, God, that's nuts, because she's giving these other writers, she's creating competition for herself.
Yeah.
And I thought, that is so unselfish. But once one person starts doing that, it kind of spreads. And now I think, I don't know where I would be without this community of other writers, for me to be able to go, are you finding this bit difficult? And how much, just really the practical stuff, like, okay, someone asked me to do a day's workshop of creative writing therapy. What's the going rate? What am I supposed to charge these people? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
You just don't know unless you surround yourself with people who are in a similar position.
And that's absolutely what we do at Writing on the Wall. We've got the Writer's Bloc, which we're in right now, and everybody here is in a community of writers or an interest in writers, or at least creative. And we also run, projects around the year. We have our festival, and we have Enterprise Hub, which is, again, offering free advice around that. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. I think the other thing I wanted to talk about as well, because it sort of links on in terms of your community and the feedback you're getting around your writing and what you like and what you want to do, is a question I wanted to talk to you about, because you've written on an article that's in defence of Love Island. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, because I really enjoyed that article, and I loved how straight away, you listed a few things, and you said already you might be judging me and calling this lowbrow. And like my personal experience is like when I went to university, not only did I not get those kind of practical advice of what I was going to do with this portfolio that I created or how I was going to go anywhere with it. I also felt incredibly judged for things that I liked. I came in with so much excitement and I said, I love sci-fi, I love fantasy, you know, I love poetry as well. And I love literary fiction. Absolutely. You know, that they are incredible. It's incredible when you read a book that changes you like that. But I also love the other side of things. I love gaming, and it was really looked down upon, and it really dampened what I did in that time I had, which was really time for me to do something. A very expensive time for you to do something, isn't it, when you go to university and go on that route. And what I love about WoW and what we continue to do is that you can build a place where you not only is it okay to express yourself and what you like, but nobody judges you. It celebrates your difference and what you're into. And you'll also find other people that are like, yes, I love that as well. And I just thought it was really interesting because you were talking about, you know, that you're writing for cartoons and doing translations for cartoons. You write for gaming and that article as well.
I think it's quite I've heard many people who have that same experience as you, having studied creative writing at university, just to have faced the wall of kind of snobbery.
Yeah.
And I think there's a quote, and I can't remember whose it is, but it's easy reading is damned hard writing, and that is so true. But that you know, easy reading is what sells as well. So many people have written books that have that are supposed to challenge you and supposed to change your life, and that are about big kind of serious topics, and usually no one has really read those books, because what do we read? We just want to read a good story, and there's nothing wrong with that. And also it's part of this just dull idea that anything that's created for women is somehow subpar. It's just nonsense. This title of chick lit, what does that mean? And that stretches across all cultural aspects. I think it's just people can be snobbish about things, and I know that people have been snobbish about certain jobs that I've done, and I just think, well, actually, I really enjoy myself and what I do, so I don't really care, and I want people to enjoy my work. Of course, that's why with us. The reason I write, well, one of the reasons I write is to give other people enjoyment. I want them to enjoy what I do, but I'm not gonna be dictated to about what are the things I want to create as well. You know, I've written for soap opera, and that's one of the most deep dive writing I've ever done. So and you know, writing for games as well, people just think of it as, people think of anything kind of gamey or anything online as well as being not real literature. Well, that's not my problem, it's their problem. Good luck to them.
Yeah. And in terms of, you know, advice for people emerging, like, don't take that barrier away from yourself as well, you know.
No, don't think of, I never think of what kind of writer I am, and I never think about an image. I don't really have an image, or I hope I don't cultivate an image of myself as a writer. I've had a couple of occasions where people have read my novels before they've met me, and then almost every time they'll say, oh, we thought you were going to be a really intense person, and I'm not really very intense at all, but my novels are quite intense. But I don't cultivate that image, because you're just you, and it doesn't matter what you create. What matters is that you're creating at all.
Absolutely. Well, we've got quite a few questions coming in, So I am going to ask you a couple of questions from the audience now. I've got a few other things I want to ask, but I'll let you guys come in now, since as you've come along on this really evening. So let's have a look. We have, in writing your novels, how do you, we've got a 1 to 4 question here, so if you need it again, let me know. In writing your novels, how do you keep motivated to push through getting it written? Do you outline? Do you have readers critiquing your work in the process, or do you get it out and down? Is there a time frame for your first draft of a novel? Quite a few questions all together.
Do I plan? I have tried that. It doesn't really work for me. I will do it sometimes if I'm on a really tight deadline. Usually what happens is I say that I want to write a particular novel, and then my publisher will kind of go yes or no. And if they say yes, they'll give me about 18 months, and then I will watch The Real Housewives for a year and 3 months, and then I'll think, oh my God, I have to write a novel in this time, and I will have to wait, I have to stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning. And that works. I've had to kind of face the fact that those novels are better than the ones I actually take time over. The best work I do is the work I do really quickly. So I think you're always thinking about it. As soon as you get the idea, it's brewing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually take a long time to write it down. And with plans, if I make a plan, I'll usually stick with it for a couple of chapters, and then I'll get bored and I'll go off on a tangent and write something completely different.
And I mean, just to answer that, the motivated one is you've got to have it in 3 months.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's a good idea to have. I don't tend to show my work to anyone before I send it off to a publisher or an agent. But I've done it when I'm struggling with the end. So my latest novel, it's a crime novel, and it's kind of a whodunit, and I wrote most of it, and I didn't know who the killer was. So I'd gotten to sort of 3/4 of the way through, and I thought, I have no idea who did this. And I sent it to my editor, and I said, who do you think did it? And I decided before I sent it, whoever she said, that wasn't going to be who it was. So no, I don't plan, and no, I don't tend to send it over to anyone before I finished. But I still get that feeling, many, many novels in, I get that horrible feeling whenever a novel is with a publisher or an agent and I haven't heard anything, and I know that they're reading it. I'm in that period now. My agent got my latest novel on Monday, and I'm thinking, oh, he hates it. Oh. So yeah.
Well, if you only got it Monday, maybe he just needs a bit more time to read it.
Yeah. I know in my sensible head I know this, but also I'm just thinking that he's going, oh, I don't know how to tell Manon how awful this is.
Yeah, of course. There's always that voice, isn't there?
But that voice is really important. I think when that voice disappears, that's when I should stop writing, because I won't care enough.
Yeah, that's true. You can look at it as a positive rather than just a negative voice. Yeah. We've got another question here from Danielle. Juggling the energy for motivation with bits of freelance work and 0-hour contracts that I'm working, I sometimes find I'll come across an open writing submission. I'll plan on submitting something and using it as a deadline to motivate myself, but then struggle to ever have the energy to follow through. Plus, I never have enough faith in myself to do it, and see it as worthwhile, as I usually discredit myself before even starting to write.
That's so normal and natural, and actually it's part of what I was just talking about. It's a really important part of your writing, and it shows that you're in a good mind space to write, because it shows that you really care about it, and it shows that it's really important to you, and that there's nothing anyone can tell you. There's no magic words I can give you here to make you write, only to keep in mind that if you don't do it, the result will be that you haven't done it. And that's just the truth of it. There's nothing that can change that. You know that this is something you want to do. So are you going to let your fear hold you back? Or are you going to be brave enough to just think, do you know what, sod it, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to do it because what is the worst thing that can happen? You know, I've been rejected loads with my writing. The first novel I wrote, I sent it to a publisher, and I knew the publisher, I knew the person that owned this publishing house, and I sent in the novel and I never got a reply, not even a no. This happens, you know. But actually, once it happens, and once you get that bad feedback or that bad review, once you get that once, you realise, actually, it's fine. It's fine that maybe you do something and someone's not going to like it. You think it's going to really hurt, but it's actually okay. What's important is that you just do it. Just do it. Don't allow yourself the space to regret.
We should get that on a soundbite, Daniel. Thank you for sharing. I think a lot of people feel like that as well. Thank you, Manon. We've got a question from Rachel. What are the key differences between writing for games and writing for TV? Are there any similarities in those skill sets?
In my experience, not much similarity there. When I've written for games, it's been someone else's basic idea, and then that we all come together in a room and talk about the practicalities of it and the technological side. But with games, it's really heavy. It's a heavy workload because obviously depends on what kind of game it is, but you have to write out every possibility that every decision that your player might make. You have to write out all of that. So it's a lot. It's heavy workload with a massive word count, and sometimes that feeling of not being in control, and maybe you don't like the way that this bit of the game goes, but it's ultimately not up to you. But there's something really satisfying about actually playing a game and know that you've been a part of that, the creation of that. With TV, it's a lovely experience. Well, in my experience so far, it's been lovely because you're in a room, or as I've been recently on Zoom, with a group of people, and you all know these characters. It's like when you're writing a novel or writing a story and you've got those characters in your mind, but you've got 5 other people that have those characters in their mind too. Yeah. And we will argue about whether this character would have a cup of tea at 10 o'clock in the morning or not. You know, and it can be a long process and it can be frustrating, but ultimately it's because you care so much about these characters. It's a really wonderful process, and I've thought so many times when I'm doing writing for TV, I wish I could have those 5 people writing a novel with me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, isn't it? Because that's almost something like, for me, definitely, that's an experience from childhood. Some of my the conversations where I've got totally lost is when you're talking to your friend about a book you both love and you're fighting over the character and what they've done and why they would have done that, and you know what they do in another situation. So it's that real love, isn't it? And getting to do that in your work must be incredible.
It is. It's just completely different to writing a novel, and to be able to do both is lovely because you can't be precious when you're writing for games or writing for TV, because it's not, nothing belongs to you with those, or with a play as well, because when I've done plays, even, you know, stage versions of my own books, I've had to say, this isn't mine anymore. I give this away, and I might not be happy with what comes out at the end, but that's fine too, it's part of a process. But in the same way, a novel is lovely because it is all yours and you do get the control. It really appeals to my control freakery when I'm writing a novel.
I have one of those too. So in a minute, I'm going to hand over to Georgia to ask her question, and then Patrick. But we do have a question that kind of links very nicely on from what we were just saying. I've got a question from Alex, who said that the more you diversify your writing by challenging yourself into new areas, does this change something about you as a person? So is that those kind of different skill sets influencing you as well?
I think every kind of work anyone does changes them a little bit as a person, but it's really great to be able to change creatively and develop creatively. I think it's having been a novelist for quite a long time, and then going into writing for games and writing TV, it made me realise that I was getting a little bit precious and that I was getting a bit controlling, and that maybe that's not what it's about in the end. So that's a really important lesson, but also just the joy of being able to work with other people. You don't realise it until you haven't done it for a very long time, and it takes time. It's not easy always, but yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Georgia, you've had your hand up for ages. I'm sorry, I'm coming to you now. If you want to come on and ask your question.
Hello. Let me just take my hand down. Hi. So I am writing a dissertation on like representation in video games, like how gender and sexuality are represented in video games, whether that's how characters look or the dialogue that they use. So I was just wondering how you navigate writing about all four characters that are already fleshed out but have completely different identities from you, like whether that is gender or sexuality or something else.
Usually at the part where I come into the video games, the characters are very, very sketchily sketched out. That's so bad, that sentence. I really apologise. I'm so hot.
Blame the heat, yeah.
So yeah, the characters are sketched out, but they're not. They don't have anything other than a really very basic sort of character. And part of our jobs as writers is to put flesh on the bones of these characters. And it is always difficult in any kind of writing to write from the perspective or to create a character that has experiences or is different to you in any way. And you don't want to... I think what's really important is that you're not tokenistic about it, and that you don't do it for the sake of ticking a box, and that all the characters, that what leads them and what's important is that you create a character you know their mind, and that's the most important bit. But there is a tendency, of course, in all kinds of writing, but maybe particularly in writing for games, that we need to make sure that we are sort of representing diversity, and that can be frustrating because you don't want it to start from that place. You want it to come naturally, but hopefully it's always been done sensitively, and hopefully it is happening more naturally now. I think 10 years ago, it was more of a question of, make sure that we have diverse characters in there too. And now it just happens. So we don't have to make the decision to do it. It just happens naturally. But as far as the process of writing, I think every company I've worked for has tried to make sure that there are diverse voices in the writing room as well.
Thanks, Manon. Patrick, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Oh no. Yeah, I do. Okay. Basically, I know I haven't really submitted anything in that sense as in novel-wise. I've entered one competition where you had to submit an initial chapter with a minimum word count, and at the time of submitting it, that's all I had. But if he was in a scenario where you had submitted, let's say, an initial, and this isn't me, I'm just creating this scenario, you'd have submitted initial 3 chapters and that's all you had to a publisher or agent and say they loved it. Is there some type of time period that they would give you in order to complete them? Oh, sorry, that's my phone just going for one because as I'm talking, my hands are everywhere. Is there some type of time period that they would give you for completing that? And also, is there a minimum word count they would expect, or is it just a case of it's as long as it needs to be?
Okay. In my experience, I think I'm coming to it from a slightly different perspective because I was writing exclusively through the medium of Welsh for maybe 10, 7, 8, 9, 10 years before I wrote anything in English. And when you're writing through the medium of Welsh, you don't need an agent, and publishers you have really kind of intimate contact with because we're just a smaller pool of people. And what happened with me is that I published the first chapter of a novel in a magazine, and an agent happened to read that magazine and then took me on. And he wouldn't take me on until he'd read the whole book. So he wouldn't have taken me on the basis of a couple of chapters of anything. And that was even with, I think I'd written 40 books at that point, and still it wasn't enough. He had to get the whole thing. Yeah. So I would tend to think, and with publishers as well, I think if you can get them to, so if you send in a chapter to an agent or a publisher or 3 chapters, the best case scenario after that tends to be, could you send me the rest of the book?
In other words, you're saying, because again, it's just more, I'm just treading ice type of thing, because as I said, I don't know, although I've been writing, I'm still in an early development stage in that respect, into having that confidence to send pieces of work off. Like I've never wrote a novel before. I'm in the process of writing one now. I love writing the short story. And I don't know whether because it seems easier because it's shorter or what, because a lot of them are leaving people hanging, and that feeling where, no, there's got to be more to it, which I hate, but I'm doing that to people, you know what I mean, in my writing. So, because although I hate it, it's a love-hate type of thing. If I read something, I think, no, or watch something, it's got the can't end like that. So I'm creating the end of myself. I think, well, people deserve to feel what I feel, and that tug of war with yourself and emotion. So yeah, it was just trying to put feelers out if that's the case. So the ideal, cut a long story short, the ideal scenario is, as you said, have it finished. So if you do send 3 and they like it, and say, well, have you got the rest? No, doesn't.
Yeah, that's the situation.
Good,
you don't want someone coming back to you and wanting the rest, and you say, okay, I'll get back to you in 18 months. But I that's only my experience, and I haven't really had the experience of sending stuff out to different agents. But saying that, my agent is not UK based, and I think it's really worth looking into agents that aren't based in the UK, because the attitude is so completely different. I was saying when I had my chat with Emma a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, that with my book Llyfr Glas Nebo, that came out in Welsh, it was taken on by the agent. That was the one that the agent read the first chapter of. I sent the rest of it. He took that on. He's based in New York. And that blew my mind, because I thought, God, this is such a Welsh book. How could he have any interest in this? But what it's made me realise is that within the UK, it's really difficult for me to get published in English in the UK with any publisher that's kind of got a big readership. But because he is New York based, he got me a publisher in the US, and he found that quite easy. And he got me publishers in Spain and France, and they're quite big publishers that obviously I've never heard of, because I'm not familiar with those countries really, the publishing industry in those countries. But then again, he came back to the UK and we sort of put the novel out there to get the feelers, and the publishers just are not interested in the Welsh thing. And I don't know if it's the same with particular geographical locations or particular cultures. I don't know how well represented different cultures are within the UK publishing side, but I have found that taking it outside the UK has completely changed my career. And I've not had to do anything because I just wrote this novel, and it's got its own life now. It's kind of gone. So don't think that just because UK-based agents and publishers may not show much interest, don't think that that's true about people who are outside the UK.
Can I ask one quick last question? Is that possible? Or
Patrick, I'm so sorry. We've got another one final.
Oh, is it? Okay. Cool.
Is it okay if you pop yours in the chat for us? And
yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Thanks, Patrick. We've got a question from Anna. It's quite a big question as well. She's asked it a while ago, so I just wanted to make sure we popped it on before we finish. Do you have any tips for writing children's books? So a way into that and starting from. It's a huge question, isn't it? But anything you can.
Yeah, well, that's my biggest love really, is children and YA literature. I read it all the time, and that's what I love writing more than anything. I would say the one tip that someone gave me is to absolutely, completely ignore all trends within it. So don't feel too affected by what you think is trendy or what you think sells at the moment, because that changes so quickly. So a couple of years ago in Welsh, there was a big thing that we needed books for teenage boys. Teenage boys weren't reading, and now everybody has written books for teenage boys, and you see it particularly in YA. You know, you've had the whole vampire thing, you've had the whole magic thing, you've had the depressed teenage love affair thing. You write exactly what you feel like writing, and I think there are quite a lot of good competitions out there. I can't think of the names of them at the moment, but I think there are quite a lot of good competitions out there for writing for children. But also test it out on children, because that's the other thing I find is sometimes I will write something and I'll think it's really good, but I am not my target audience because I'm not a child. So I can show something to my 11-year-old son and he will go, that's just rubbish, I don't know, that's just boring, mum. And it's important to sort of have that ability to acknowledge, actually, I've written this for me, for the child in me, or the child within, you know, yourself as an adult. But yeah, the main thing is just to write exactly what feels right to you, and not try and second guess the trends at the moment, because it doesn't really work that way. By the time you've done it, you will have missed the trend.
Brilliant. Thank you, Manon. It's 1 minute past. That absolutely flew by, so we're going to have to finish it there. But I just want to say thank you so much, Manon, for your advice and your stories. I really enjoyed it, and I know everyone else did. We've got a lovely round of applause there. So basically, Manon's here for another week. We have her until the 30th of July. There's loads more to join in next week. On Tuesday, we have a flash fiction workshop. We didn't even fully get onto flash fiction, although thank you, Patrick, for talking about short stories and your love of short stories. So we'll hope to see you there. So that's on Tuesday, the 27th, and the workshop is at 6 p.m. On Wednesday,
I'll be there. Yeah, I am already booked on that, so yeah.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. On Wednesday, the 28th at 6 p.m, we have our open house, and that's an opportunity to share your work and get feedback from Manon, but also from your community of writers. We've talked about that today, how important that is. This is your chance. You either do it or you don't do it, and we'll see you there on Wednesday. Get booked on. And then finally on Friday, on the 30th at 4 p.m, we can celebrate the fantastic time that we've had with Manon on the residency with the Bloc party, and that's at 4 p.m. on Friday. So all of those are available to book on our website. Hopefully you know it by now. I know Lauren's going to pop the link in our chat box. If you're listening on YouTube, it's www.writingonthewall.org.uk, and just go to our Writer's Block page and follow the links from there. If you need any help with that, please just email us on info@writingonthewall.org.uk and we will always support and help. This has been an Enterprise Hub event under the Writers' Bloc, which is a fantastic programme. If you're umming and ahhing about getting involved, why not get some free support? It's here for you. If you are a Liverpool City resident, you have a creative idea, you want to be a freelancer, tap into this resource. Come along to the drop-in that I have on Monday at 3 p.m. You'll just be talking to me, asking any questions. I can tell you how to sign up, and we can get you referred to the main hub and tap into that fabulous opportunity. I want to say thank you to our funders for making this possible. The European Regional Development Fund funds Enterprise Hub, and the National Lottery Reaching Communities Fund, Liverpool City Region Emergency Fund, and the Steve Morgan Foundation's makes the Writers' Bloc possible. Also, thank you to everybody who's donated for this evening's event. And if you would like to donate to Writing on the Wall, there will be a link in the chat and in the chat on the YouTube channel as well. Thank you very much in advance. And finally, as always, we won't let you get away without filling a monitoring form. They only take 5 minutes and it really supports us to run these events. Your feedback influences how we deliver them in the future. And the link to do that is in the chat box, and it will also be in the comments section on the YouTube video. Thank you again to Manon. Thank you again to the WOW staff. Thank you to our audience. Thanks for joining us on this incredibly warm evening. Go and enjoy the sun. Good night, everybody.